Good evening. I'll call to order the regular council meeting on Monday, August 17th, 2020 at 6 p.m. I want to begin by acknowledging that we are holding our meeting this evening in the traditional territory of the Wasanich First Nations. I want to provide an ongoing update to the public that Sydney Council meetings remain closed to the public during the ongoing pandemic, as we cannot provide proper physical distance for our 7 council members and town staff, and thus we can also not accommodate members of the public. However, our meetings continue to be webcast live, and webcast recordings are later posted on the town's website. Council also invites the public to speak at public participation period by registering prior to the meeting, to speak electronically through Zoom, or by sending email correspondence, which will be read out at the meeting. More information on doing either is available at the top of each agenda or by contacting the town. Also, for benefit of the public, this evening we have Councillors Garnett to my right and Councillor Rintoul to my left in the council chamber, and 4 council colleagues are participating via Zoom. Good evening to, you can hear them but you can't see them on your screen. Good evening to Councillors Duncan, Fallett, O'Keefe and Wainwright. And staff attending this evening include CEO Mr. Humble, CFO Mr. Hissick, our Director of Engineering, Works and Parks Ms. Clary, Senior Manager of Current Planning Ms. Verhagen, and our Fire Chief Mr. Mickelson, and Corporate Secretary Ms. Nelson. I'll turn to approval of our agenda, noting the following changes. Under 5B1 of the fence variance request, we have 2 additional pieces of correspondence. Under 11, Councillor reports, Councillor O'Keefe has 2 reports as liaison to the Downtown BIA and the Peninsula Chamber. Under 13L, we have revised amendments from what first appeared in the agenda package regarding our legal counsel policy. And under 1612, correspondence for information regarding the use of rodenticides, we have 3 additional pieces of correspondence. So with those additions and changes, I'll look for a motion to approve.
Move approval as amended.
Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call Councillor Fallett, if you want to unmute. Can you unmute, Councillor Fallett?
There, sorry, I was having difficulty. My apologies, I also have a councillor's report.
No, that's great. Thank you. And with that, I'll call the question. All in favor? The motion carries. Thank you. We'll now move to our regular public participation period. We generally allocate up to 3 minutes for speakers. And with the public participation opportunities that we have, as I mentioned in my opening, we do have 4 written submissions, and I'll turn to Mr. Humble to read out that public participation this evening. Mr. Humble.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the first public participation item is from Mr. Denny Jelinas, and he resides at 2545 Oakville Avenue. And it reads as follows. Mayor and Councillors, at your July 20 meeting, you considered a staff report on public washrooms in downtown Sydney. The report outlined a number of options to replace the existing public washroom located on the 4th Street parking lot of the Army, Navy, and Air Force Veterans Local. This report also sets out options for new washroom facilities in the downtown core, and in particular near the waterfront. These included the purchase and installation of a Portland loo, either on Beacon or in nearby in a nearby waterfront park, the installation of a less expensive precast concrete structure in Eastview Park, and the purchase of a second event washroom trailer, which could be moved closer to major events as required, or even leased out to event organizers to help offset costs. The report recommended that staff be directed to proactively pursue the possibility of negotiating the establishment of public washrooms in future developments in the downtown area. That the existing 4th Street washroom be replaced with an accessible semi-permanent washroom trailer at a cost of around $100,000. That the budget for the Portland loo be increased from $150,000 to $200,000. That the Portland loo be installed either in Beacon Park, Eastview Park, or at 1st Street and Beacon. Following discussion, Council passed a resolution that the existing 4th Street washroom be replaced with an accessible semi-permanent washroom trailer and the staff be directed to research and proactively pursue the possibility of negotiating the establishment of public washrooms at appropriate locations in Sydney. The minutes of the August 17 meeting are to be adopted later this evening. While there are many washrooms located in Sydney, for example at Tulista and Iroquois Parks, in the downtown core, in restaurants, bars, coffee shops, and at the town hall, the Anavets facility appears to be in bad shape and should be replaced. At the same time, I do not think this is the time to implement this proposal or any of the other options set out in the staff report. As noted in last week's PNR, quote, the long-term economic pain from COVID-19 has created the sharpest economic downturn in the region in at least a generation. As we know, the economic impacts are going to continue well into 2021, if not beyond, end quotes. I believe the mayor is correct in his assessment. Through his prediction of recovery in 2021 could well be too optimistic. The retail sector is struggling and all economic forecasts emphasize uncertainty. That same uncertainty must surely also apply with reference to the town's budget forecast for the coming years. This is not the time to consider spending limited public resources on things like a $200,000 Portland loo, which is essentially an expensive porta potty. Indeed, I am not convinced this would be a good choice for spending residents' taxes at any time. Any resources we do have could instead be directed to economic recovery to build back a better Sydney. Finally, I understand that Council is considering a series of virtual town halls to exchange information with residents. May I respectfully suggest that a virtual town hall would provide an excellent opportunity to ask for and receive input from residents on public washrooms in Sydney. Thank you.
If I may just comment for a moment, Mr. Humble?
Certainly.
I certainly want to thank Mr. Gilina for his submission and note that it was in the strategic plan and financial plan that we would proceed with washroom installation, replacement installation in 2020. With the impact of COVID, you did accurately summarize what came before us, but Council has not given direction to proceed immediately on that, particularly the Portland loo. There will be a future report coming back to Council with regards to the options that Council asked staff to explore. So we appreciate your input, and there certainly will be further consideration going forward.
Okay, the next public participation item is an email from Mr. David Cavally, who resides at 9655 First Street. It reads as follows. Please excuse the late submission. It took me a while to read all the package for this evening. 2 items stood out in my reading. First, that we pay a lot of tax to the CRD, a body that is not directly elected. Perhaps a detailed report on what Sydney actually receives for our money would be nice. Second, if we are paying for the overall regional betterment, why not ask the CRD to provide a boat launch ramp and parking for all Peninsula residents? The need is clearly identified in the excellent report on the Tulista ramp situation. They could purchase private land, a benefit we could all appreciate. Just the suggestion.
Thank you, Mr. Cavalier.
The next item is from Mr. Clarence Bolt, who resides at 9659 2nd Street in Sydney. Given that 1, the Supreme Court of BC decision of July 15, 2020 ordered the town to reconsider the Happy Buddha license referral because of a procedural misstep, specifically the public consultation process. 2, the August 4, 2020 report to Sydney Council's Committee of the Whole by the Senior Manager of Long Range Planning on August 4, 2020 pointed out that the applicant, Happy Buddha, had met all of the LCRB and Town of Sydney regulatory and policy requirements. Number 3, the same Committee of the Whole report recommended a robust public input process concerning the application reflecting both Sydney and LCRB requirements, namely, 1, that staff be directed to gather the views of residents regarding the proposed Happy Buddha cannabis retail store license and report back to Council with the results. 2, that the method used to gather residents' views include the following, and that any written correspondence received be forwarded to council for consideration. A, that owners and tenants in occupation of property within 100 meters of 2410 Beacon Avenue be notified by mail. B, that advertisements be placed in 2 consecutive issues of the Peninsula News Review. C, that signage consistent with Schedule D of Land Use Procedures Bylaw number 1380 be placed in the storefront window of the proposed location for a period of not less than 14 days. And 3, that council provide a special public participation opportunity at the council meeting where the public may speak to the proposed cannabis retail store license. Number 4, Sydney's Committee of the Whole meeting on August 10th, 2020, move the following. Item 9A4, that local schools, daycares, and parent advisory groups in Sydney and North Saanich be notified and invited to share the notice with parents so that they may submit their views to the town. What is the rationale objective in altering the usual standard notification process of inviting comprehensive and numerous public input opportunities by singling out these particular groups for special attention? What is the expected outcome of these referrals?
Thank you, Mr. Bolt. Of course, we will be receiving those Committee of the Whole minutes this evening, and there will be opportunity for further discussion.
The last public participation submission is from Mona Brash, and she resides at 9659 2nd Street in Sydney. It reads as follows. Mayor and Council, at the August 10th committee meeting, some comments were made by councillors that do not hold up to scrutiny. Concerns were raised. 1, that people would buy cannabis products and then proceed to light up joints in front of the store. 2, that many Sydney activities/celebrations happen in the vicinity of Happy Buddha and may be negatively impacted. 3, that the products were non-prescription. Comment. Compared to another legal drug used in Sydney, alcohol. 1, people do not purchase their product and proceed to open bottles or cans and drink in front of the liquor stores on Beacon. Legal cannabis products are more carefully packaged than alcohol and not easily opened. 2, the Sunday concerts, markets, boat races, bed races, and parades happen within a block of the Beacon Landing liquor store and numerous restaurants that serve alcohol. Council has not suggested these establishments be closed or, if already there, that the Sydney activities not occur given the vicinity to alcohol for the many thousands of children and adults. 3, every liquor store, grocery store, and pharmacy in Sydney have non-prescription legal drugs, as would Happy Buddha. To raise the issue of prescription versus non-prescription is not applicable to this application. Finally, the products the Happy Buddha would sell are legal. They would be sold only to adults. We adults in Sydney are perfectly capable of making our own decision about whether to buy any product or not. It is not up to any member of council to judge whether we have access to a legal and regulated product in a zone and location that allows it. And that concludes the public participation submissions.
Thank you, Ms. Brash, for your letter this evening. And with that, I'll bring public participation to a close. We don't have any individuals wishing to join us by Zoom to speak this evening. I'll next turn to the special public participation opportunity this evening. This is a result of us receiving the 2019 annual report, which is later on in our agenda, and it is a requirement that we have a special public participation opportunity for any individuals wishing to comment on content in the annual report. We do not have any submissions today, so I will not proceed further with that. And we don't have any public hearings or presentations, and I'll next move to number 5, bylaws. And I'll start with bylaw 5A1, our tree preservation bylaw number 2195, amendment number 1. As this is new business to council, I would ask staff for an introduction, please.
Thank you, Mayor, and to council. So this bylaw amendment is being brought forward to allow, if the town's requesting a private residence to remove a tree because it causes a hazard to the public, to give staff the authority to waive the fees, both the requirement to potentially plant up to 2 replacement trees and also potentially the permit application fee, which is $250. So currently, if someone is removing a protected tree from their property, they are required to plant 2 replacement trees, and each of those, if they don't have room on their property, each of those has a $750 deposit that they have to pay, which it could result in $1,500 that they would have to pay. So this is just giving staff the opportunity to waive those fees if we are requesting a private resident to remove the tree from their property.
Great, thank you, Ms. Clary. And we have before us a proceeding with introduction and 3 motions for first, second, and third readings. Yes, we'll start off with questions. Councillor Garnett.
Thanks. If I could through you to staff, for some clarification, I'm reading down lower in the report here, I understand the waiving fees part of it, but it's also saying to waive the replacement tree requirement. It doesn't necessarily specify fees. So are we saying that if we're asking them to cut a tree down for the reasons you've given, that there would not be 2 trees planted at some point by us then?
So through Mayor to Councillor Garnett, the town does have a tree budget that we will replant trees, but it won't be specifically like these replacement trees. We're not normally a private resident who's removing a protected tree from their property. They are required to plant 2 replacement trees, right. And this is waiving that fee. And later on in the report, it does say that we do plant more trees than this very unique situation. This doesn't happen very often, so we plant more trees than are removed because of this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, I'll look to motions.
I'll move first reading.
Second.
All those in favor? The motion carries.
I'll move second reading.
Second.
Discussion? Councillor Garnett?
Yeah, I understanding what staff is saying, and I understand the rationale behind waiving the fees because it's not really the homeowner's fault if something like that occurs. But I just want to keep that replacement tree thing in place, just because I understand we have a budget for planting trees, but this holds us to making sure that 2 trees are planted for every one of those trees that are protected. And if that specific thing is not maintained within the bylaw, then I can't support it. So.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Councillor Wainwright.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, for the benefit of the public listening to this discussion, this is a rare circumstance that is being addressed by this bylaw amendment. In the entire time that I've been on council, we have only once had to approach a private property owner about a hazardous tree that is a protected species, and staff have therefore discovered that they don't have the discretion to waive the obligations for the property owner. So this is a situation with the town making the initiative to have the tree removed, and because of the way the bylaw reads, the property owner would have to pay for the fee and would also have to pay for the replacement trees. And staff would like to have the discretion to waive those requirements. Now, the town can, on its own hook, provide the 2 replacement trees. What they want is discretion not to charge the property owner for that. And I can support that. And if we don't amend the bylaw, then staff doesn't have that discretion. So I'll be voting for this.
Okay, Thank you, Councillor Wainwright. Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a query to staff. I'm wondering, I'm thinking of, Councillor Wainwright says, that this, there hasn't been many of these circumstances in the past. And I'm wondering if staff have any concerns that once we pass this as it is, would homeowners have the option to come forward to say, hey, there's a hazardous tree on my property, or get their neighbor to report a hazardous tree, and then to let the town deem that it's a hazard and sort of go through that loophole so that they can avoid that $1,500 deposit. So I'm wondering if there's some policy around that to confirm that it would just be in, very rare circumstances that the town would initiate that.
Ms. Clary?
Thank you, Mayor, to Councillor O'Keefe. So this is a very unique situation where the tree could pose a harm to the public and public property. So that if, a property owner of the tree would have to be close to public property for it to fall under this situation. So if the tree were to fall and it would fall into the town's boulevard, but it isn't actually a boulevard tree if it's on public property, or it's on private property, but it's close to the boulevard, that's potentially where something like that could happen. And if our arborist does deem it a hazard, and it could be because of a call from a resident, that it would potentially fall under this. But again, this, as Councillor Wainwright said, this is a very rare situation. It doesn't happen very often where those circumstances fall into place.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If I may comment for a moment, I certainly appreciate the comment and concern or principle that Councillor Garnett is referring to. Of course, an option if you were to support what staff is intending, and I certainly support the rationale as Councillor Wainwright explained it, in supporting these bylaw amendments, you could put forward an amendment seeking to have that added to this current bylaw. Council would then express its view. I won't express my view until such time as you brought it forward, but that is an option versus turning down support for a bylaw that I think has some rationale for moving forward.
I'll make that amendment, that we maintain the two tree replacement onto the additional amendment.
Okay, so that, I'll turn it to staff. I have a comment, but I'll turn to staff.
Just for clarification, is that at the town's cost?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have a seconder for the motion?
I'll second.
Discussion on the motion? I'll call a question. All in favor? Opposed? We have, 4 opposed. Is that correct? Yes. Yes, we have 4 opposed. The motion is defeated. So I'll go back to the main motion. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? We have 1 opposed. The motion carries. Thank you. I'll next turn to item 5A2, which is
Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Sir?
Third reading.
Oh, I'm sorry?
That was second reading.
No, if we just passed second reading, Councillor, if I'm sorry for my misstep, if we could have a motion for third reading.
We'll move third reading.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? 1 opposed. Motion carries. I'll now turn to number 5A2, which is our service connection fees and charges, bylaw number 2199, and amendment number 1. This was considered at, and readings were passed at previous meeting, and we have a motion.
I move that the bylaw be considered for adoption.
Second.
Okay, if I could just on the wording, we won't consider it, we'll move adoption, if that's what you're proposing, Councillor.
Move adoption.
And it's seconded, all those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. We'll turn to our building regulations, bylaw number 2200. We have amendment number 9 to amend municipal requirements for meter connections for multifamily buildings. And this is an outcome of previous discussions at council, so we do have motions for readings before us.
I'll move first reading.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? We have one opposed. Motion carries.
I'll move second reading.
Second.
Discussion. No discussion. I'll call a question. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. The motion carries.
I'll move third reading.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? One opposed. The motion carries. Thank you. And we'll turn to the fourth, our tax sale deferral bylaw number 2201. As this is a new bylaw and new to council, I might ask staff to introduce, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tax sale is an annual process where properties that have taxes outstanding for 3 years face a process called tax sale, which is a legislative authority that allows us to ensure that all properties within the town are paying their share of the operating costs of the local government. Even though we have this legislative tool, we've been successful in avoiding tax sale for over 20 years in Sydney through concerted efforts to maintain contact with properties with delinquent taxes, let them know of the implications, and ensure collection. So this year, as one of the responses to COVID-19, the province is allowing a 1-year deferral of the annual tax sale, and this must be done by bylaw if we were to undertake it. So what would happen if adopted is that tax sale would be held over for a year, so anyone with delinquent taxes would have 1 additional year to bring their taxes up to date before any measures are taken. Now, given that tax sale hardly ever happens, I didn't go into a lot of detail about the mechanics of how it works, but if any member of council does have questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Hisik. I'll turn to Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. Just one question I'm wondering about, say in the event that we have a property that we take action on, there's a few later on the agenda, and we add the amount to the taxes, say for remediation of the property, and then the taxes don't get paid. Does that mean we would have to wait for 3 years to start, say, proceedings to force the sale of the house, or are there other remedies?
I'm afraid, Councillor, you have me a little bit on that one. In order to sell it under the tax sale provisions, we would have to wait until it becomes delinquent. So if we were to add it to taxes this year, it would turn into arrears next year and then delinquent the following year. I'm not aware if there are any special provisions related to the action we're taking from the bylaw perspective.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hisik. Any further questions? So we do have motions to consider to move with readings.
I'll move that council adopt tax sale deferral bylaw number 2201.
Second.
Okay, sorry, we do have to, we are introducing and doing first reading this evening. We'll have 4 motions if we proceed.
Move first reading.
Second.
All in favor? Motion carries.
Second reading.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? None opposed, motion carries.
Move third reading.
Second.
All those in favor? Motion carries. And just for the public's benefit, because of COVID-19, the province did amend council procedures whereby in certain circumstances we are allowed to adopt a bylaw the same evening as we give readings, and this is one example of that. You saw 2 earlier ones this evening where we just went to third reading, and we will consider adoption at a future meeting.
Move adoption?
Second.
All those in favor? And that motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Now turn to 5B, which is development permits and development variance permits. We have development variance permit application number DV 100296 at 9650 Fifth Street to permit an overheight fence and a sun deck to be built in the exterior side yard. We had one submission received prior to this evening, and today we received 2 additional submissions, and we have a recommendation.
I'll move the recommendation that the bylaw be introduced, I'll move the recommendation that the application be approved, subject to conditions as per council's resolution number 2020.34.406.
Second.
Discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? One opposed. Two, sorry, are you opposed, Councillor O'Keefe? Yeah, we have 2 opposed. The motion carries. I'll now move to number 6, adoption of minutes. We have 3 sets of minutes before us this evening. Those of the special council meeting of July 20th. The same day we had a regular council meeting, July 20th, and then our special council meeting of August 5th.
Move that the 3 sets of minutes be adopted?
Second.
Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. The motion carries. Thank you. We have no business not completed at a previous meeting. However, under number 8, we do have business arising from minutes. There were 3 motions passed by council at the special council in-camera meeting of July 20th. And for information, I would like to read those council resolutions now. The first was that the email from B. Sina, dated July 9th, 2020, advising of her resignation from the Economic Advisory Committee be accepted, and that a letter be sent to Ms. Sina thanking her for her service, and that the vacant position be advertised with the annual citizen appointment advertisement in October. And I want to thank Ms. Sina for participating on that committee. She did sell her business in downtown Sydney, and thus was no longer going to serve on the committee. The second resolution was that the email from Kay Bull-Tomer, dated July 17th, 2020, advising of her resignation from the COVID-19 Recovery Task Force be accepted, and a letter be sent to Mrs. Bull-Tomer thanking her for her service, and that another member of the Advisory Planning Commission be considered for an appointment to the task force. And I want to thank Mrs. Bull-Tomer for her participation. She had commitments arise, which led to her stepping down. The third resolution was that Mayor and the Chief Administrative Officer be delegated the authority to directly appoint a member from the Advisory Planning Commission to the COVID-19 Recovery Task Force to fill that space that Ms. Bull-Tomer had. And I'm pleased to announce that we invited Graydon Soul, a longtime member of the Advisory Planning Commission, and he accepted and has participated in meetings, and we thank him for his community involvement. Next, I'll move, we don't have any petitions or delegations. And I'll move to the mayor's report, and I do have some updates. I have a number of updates since our last council meeting in late July. On August the 4th, I participated in a lunch meeting with MLA Adam Olson, Mayor Jeff Orr, and Mayor Ryan Windsor. We discussed a number of topics common to us on the peninsula. As we have later in a report tonight regarding the 3 municipalities each commencing with their OCP reviews this year, we talked a little of how our timing differs between the 3 municipalities and the challenge the pandemic presents for all-important public engagement during these OCP reviews. We also had Mr. Bob Pert and Jerem Gawley of the Bioregional Framework Initiative. That initiative, you may recall, was started by the Sandwich Peninsula Environment Coalition. They gave us an update on how their process is proceeding, and they've been in communication with the senior planners from our 3 municipalities, and we'll have an update again in September. There are discussions with staff on how the bioregional framework will intersect with our OCP process. On August 11th, I participated in another electronic meeting with other mayors in the Greater Victoria region. We gave general updates on how our communities are recovering from the pandemic. The impacts, of course, vary across the region. At this meeting, there was discussion on pool openings, which the public are very, very keen on, at various recreation centers around the region, and homeless challenges around the region, across the region as well. On August 12th, I participated in the South Island Prosperity Partnership Partners Meeting, which is the mayors and councillors representing the 11 current municipal funders of SIP. We received a brief update on SIP's Rising Economy Task Force. The 12 subcommittees will be submitting their final reports later this month, and the process will continue as was presented to us by SIP CEO Emily de Rosenroll a few weeks back here at Council, and carrying on into the fall. We also discussed proposed 2021 to 2025 partners funding request, and there'll be further information coming forward on that at a later date. On August the 12th, at the CRD board meeting, we received 2 reports from 2 significant projects. The first was the Capital Region Coastal Flood Inundation Mapping Project. In 2019, the CRD received a $705,000 grant from the provincially and federally funded National Disaster Mitigation Program to undertake this mapping project. The purpose of the project was to help inform the CRD, the local governments, First Nations, and other interested stakeholders of the risk of coastal flooding due to sea level rise and tsunamis. The project was completed by consultants and resulted in 3 separate reports. The first is called the Digital Elevation Model Development Report. I'm still reading that one. The second was the Sea Level Rise Modeling and Mapping Report, a very interesting report, as was the third, the Tsunami Modeling and Mapping Report. These reports were received by the CRD board last week, which directed that they be forwarded to our local governments, which may be used to develop coastal flood hazard policy in our respective municipalities, as well as inform emergency mitigation and evacuation plans. The second project was the Regional Greenhouse Gas Inventory Study. And the background to that was in the Regional Growth Strategy a number of years ago, CRD set a target reduction in community greenhouse gas emissions of 33% from 2007 levels by 2020 and 61% by 2038. And in 2019, the CRD board declared a climate emergency, and at its a meeting last year, the CRD board directed staff to complete a regional greenhouse gas inventory and emissions reduction pathway analysis. And so that report has been received, and some of the results. This was the latest inventory is as of 2018, and it indicates that the capital region emits approximately 1.7 million tons of CO2 annually, and it indicates that emissions are approximately the same as compared to 2007 levels, with a slight decrease of 1.1%. So that was quite disappointing to receive, given the targets that have been set. However, that was first received at the Environment Committee meeting, which I sit on, and we requested that staff add to that report with the per capita emissions. And that report was received last Friday as part of the overall report. And it showed that with a population increase of 15% between 2007 and 2018, essentially we had about a 15% reduction in per capita greenhouse gas emissions, which is a positive. It's not getting us to where we want to be or where many of us think we need to be, but it was positive. This inventory study is done by municipality, and it's been forwarded to the municipalities to help inform their future greenhouse gas and climate action plans. And we also invited municipalities to give feedback back to CRD for what they are responsible for. So both those reports are available on the CRD website, and if they haven't already, will be forwarded to staff. And I would ask, or just make a suggestion to staff that they be brought forward to council, perhaps with a report. I think council will be interested to see particularly where Sydney is, both in the overall emissions, but also in our per capita reductions vis-a-vis our neighboring municipalities in the region. On August 14th, last Friday, I met with representatives from the Peninsula Pickleball Association. Council will note that there was a letter from the president, Ms. Corrine Reed, that is in our agenda package tonight under correspondence for information, as well as staff's reply. Really, it was just an update with their interests and the relationships with the other two municipalities and wanting to look forward. They have some ideas, and they may in fact have further communications with the Peninsula Tennis Association, and perhaps come back to council with some requests. They were certainly appreciative. Mr. Hissick and I met with them, and they were certainly appreciative of the Parks Master Plan that we have underway and the improvements that we're looking to do presently, and what we'll be looking to consider in future budget deliberations. So that's a summary of my mayor's report. I'll turn to number 11, councillor's report, and I'll start with Councillor O'Keefe and your two updates, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chamber of Commerce, they had their board meeting on July 29th. Just a bit of tidbits from there. Businesses picking up information from architects say that they're busy with small jobs. A lot of people doing home renos. Businesses that are providing services such as accounting and legal services are pretty busy. Some businesses are still having trouble getting parts and materials and merchandise, and that's due to production in other parts of the world that are running at reduced capacity due to the pandemic. They mentioned that tourist numbers are improving. At the July 29th meeting, the numbers had doubled what they had been the previous week. And when I checked in with them this past week, they said that the number of visitors was continuing to increase. They were seeing a lot of visitors from the mainland for day trips, and they were routing them into Sydney. And as you'll see later in the agenda, they're asking for our support in getting the Ministry of Transportation to designate their location as a provincial rest area. In the meantime, North Saanich has agreed to fund the washroom cleaning for the next 6 months until the ministry comes through. In regards to the Sydney BIA, so when the province allowed businesses to start up again, the BIA wasted no time. They've done a number of things. They had a welcome back to business video. They're marketing a staycation in Sydney. There's still time to participate in their shop local sweepstakes that runs till August 31st. All you need to do is go to the SBI website and pop in your name and one of your favorite businesses in order to win one of $500 shopping sprees. Another thing that the SBIA had been looking into was an open source data tool. So what they were looking for was something that would provide access to an array of data that could be used by residents, businesses, and potential investors to make informed decisions, preferably on the town's website. Would help stimulate economic activity in Sydney. And it's something that a lot of local governments have been doing. Coincidentally, at last UBCM, I had met someone from the province, the Ministry of Citizen Services, who was working on such a tool. And so they invited me, and I reached out to Executive Director at the SBIA, Morgan Shaw. So we got to view the latest version of their tool and provide some feedback on that, and how it could be used for local governments, for planning, economic development, and other purposes. So what the tool does is it imports existing data from other sources. So it imports all the census data. It can import the myriad of data that's available through the provincial government. And then it repackages it so that all of the information for a particular town or a particular region is sort of at your fingertips. So it's a lot easier to access, a lot easier to view, and a lot easier to analyze and make decisions on that. They're launching this tool in later this month. Initially, it will probably be most useful to more provincial ministry people, although it will be available to others as well. And they're also looking to add a feature that would allow local governments to access or to input their local data sets as well. So I wanted council to be aware of that, because I know that this is something that has come up in the previous Economic Development Commission. It's been tossed around, I think, in other conversations related to economic development and maybe economic recovery. So we'll see what it looks like when it comes out in September, and maybe look for opportunities that we might be able to use it here. So as it evolves, I'll let council know if it's something that we want to take a look at it, and perhaps see if it's something EAC might want to look at as well to provide feedback. Yeah, and that's it for me, unless anybody has questions on any of that.
Thanks, Councillor O'Keefe. I'll turn to Councillor Fallett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to provide an update on what's happening at Furl with our library system. And the service which transports books, DVDs, magazines, and more throughout the system was suspended, as we all know, sort of back in mid-March. And we're back now to interbranch deliveries, allowing library users now to get books and material that is throughout the system. So that's really good news that that's happening again. And also, for the time being, the library is waiving late fees on overdue material. So now would be a good time to return all borrowed materials so that we can keep items in circulation. And the other part is, council will recall that in the last year, we've had a number of negative comments regarding the nature and scope of the collection at the Sydney North Saanich Library. And I have been in touch with Verl and Rosemary Bonanno, the ED, about this, and we've talked about it. And I know I've talked with the mayor and the CEO about this as well. And so Verl has now put out a survey, an online survey. It's on the Town of Sydney's website as well as the library site, and they're urging all of us to participate in this survey, to give them feedback on what's working and what isn't working about the collection and the service at the library. And I urge everyone to take the time and fill out the survey. So that's my update on that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fallett. That's good information for the community. A lot of library users waiting to get more books. So I'll now turn to number 12, committee reports, and I'll turn to Councillor Duncan, who is chair of our committee of the whole meeting, with regards to the minutes and recommendations.
Thank you, Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There are 3 recommendations, and I'm going to give a bit of a preamble just for the purpose for the public listening about.
Councillor Duncan.
Sorry, go ahead.
If you could move first receipt of the minutes.
First? Yeah. Okay. So, recommendation 1, the committee recommends, and I so move, that a letter be drafted from Mayor and Council to our local MLA outlining the impacts that COVID-19 has had on our bylaw enforcement.
Do we have a seconder?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay, discussion?
All right.
Okay, all those in favor? None opposed, the motion carries. Councillor Duncan, did you want to go back and move that the minutes from the meeting be received?
Yes. I move that the minutes be received.
Second.
All in favor? Passes unanimously. Please continue with recommendation 2, Council.
Thank you. The committee recommends, and I so move, that the staff report dated August 4th, 2020, providing an update on the financial results for the first half of the 2020 fiscal year and the status of the 2020 capital projects, be received for information.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor? Oh, sorry, Councillor Duncan?
No.
All those in
Sorry,
favor?
jumped the gun.
Sorry, all in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. And the third recommendation.
All right. The committee recommends, and I so move, 1, that the staff be directed to gather the views of residents regarding, this is regarding cannabis retail store referral, Happy Buddha Cannabis at 2410 Beacon Avenue. 1, that staff be directed to gather the views of residents regarding the proposed Happy Buddha Cannabis retail store license and report back to council with the results. 2, that the method used to gather residents' views include the following, and that any written correspondence received be forwarded to council for consideration. A, that owners and tenants in occupation of property within 100 meters or 328 feet of 2410 Beacon Avenue be notified by mail. B, that advertisements be placed in 2 consecutive issues of the Peninsula News Review. And C, that signage consistent with Schedule D of Land Use Procedures Bylaw number 1380 be placed in the storefront window of the proposed location for a period of not less than 14 days. And 3, that council provide a special public participation opportunity at the council meeting where the public may speak to the proposed cannabis retail store license. And 4, that local schools, daycares, and parent advisory groups in Sydney and North Saanich be notified and invited to share the notice with parents so that they may submit their views to the town.
Second.
Discussion. Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know we got comments about this one at public participation. I'm going to note that I'm still going to support this recommendation as it is, though at the council meeting, I did vote against the addition of number 4. I believe maybe some of the rest of council still wants to carry this through and get as robust an input as they can before making their decisions. So I will still support it as it is.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wainwright?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was wondering if we could vote on the first 3 parts of that recommendation separately from the 4th part.
Certainly, a request to split is certainly received, and so we will proceed on that. So if we could, if I could take the motion that was just passed to be a motion for the first 3. Do we have to, turning to Ms. Nelson, do we have to rescind the first, or we can just go to split? Yeah. So consider the motion split, and we are now discussing the first 3 recommendation, or the first 3 parts of the recommendation, sorry. Further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimous. And we do have the 4th part of the recommendation now to consider. And do we need a mover and seconder, or can we consider that having been moved? Okay, so we'll consider that moved, and I'll open that for discussion now. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm still in favor of moving this forward. And, you know, I know that there's some concerns expressed at public participation and, you know, mention that why are we making a special effort in this instance to sort of go above and beyond what our normal notification process is. And I guess, you know, one of the reasons is this is different than say a variance for a higher fence or a 6-story building. And it's also because Island Health has indicated that there is a particular risk to youth at this. And so I think it's reasonable, you know, when we go out with our public notices, the rationale is we contact those people who we think are most impacted by whatever the decision might be. And in most cases, that usually relates to geographical proximity. And so hence, you know, any neighbors in the proximity of where this fence is being proposed will be notified. And so for me, what's different here is that those who are most impacted may not necessarily be in the immediate geographical location, but they're in our community. And the parents who of those youth are busy. They're not necessarily reading the PNR. And since their children are the most impacted, I think it's reasonable that we make an extra special effort to reach out to them and let their views be known. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor Fallot, then Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I concur with Councillor O'Keefe's comments, and I just want to add that this is the first store of this type that we're bringing into Sydney. And I think it's imperative and incumbent on us that we do take as much time and ensure that we do it right. And should we be criticized for asking for too much community engagement on this rather than what is normal? This is a different product. Yes, it's legal, get all of that. But this is the first store of its type that we're bringing into Sydney. And I think by asking the opinions and for feedback from parents of youth and children, where, as Councillor O'Keefe pointed out, Island Health has some concerns in regards to the impact of marijuana, cannabis, I think we're doing the right thing, and making this extra effort and taking this step should be viewed as a positive thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fallot. Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of things. I also noted in the report that Island Health states that tobacco and alcohol have more negative adverse effects than cannabis, just for a point of reference. And as far as the youth being the greatest impacted by this decision, I don't agree with that at all, given that they can't enter the store. These are products for 19 and older. A liquor store, a tobacco store, a vape store, all children can go into. They can't go into a cannabis retail store. So there may be health impacts associated with, and I won't dispute that. But opening a retail cannabis store in Sydney does not have the greatest impact on the youth. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garnett. I'll turn to Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Further to Councillor Garnett's point, what Island Health is saying when they say that this has a large impact on youth is that when we find in studies of teenagers who've taken up smoking cannabis as teenagers, it can in fact affect their brain development and into adulthood, because that's a special time when your brain is developing, and taking up any kind of drug will affect that. There are similar negative effects to taking up smoking or taking up drinking, and most of us, if we're going to take up a vice like that, are going to do it usually when we're a teenager, and that's just how humans kind of work. So this is what they mean by that. And so notifying local primary schools or daycares, parent advisory groups of an elementary school is not going to help us protect those youth, because it doesn't matter what their parents say. If they can get it illegally on the street from Joe Blow, who's growing 4 plants in his parents' basement, they're still going to do it. And if you're going to get feedback from the parents who are going to be having, say, gummies or the candy versions, which is another concern people have with the edible products, well, the kids usually will get a hold of those and accidentally consume them because they were in their parents' house. So the feedback we're going to get from parents who use the daycares and the elementary schools and things is going to fall along 2 fault lines. Those who are perfectly fine with it because they themselves use these cannabis products responsibly at home in the same way many of us, have a beer or a glass of wine. And the other side, who are going to believe that nobody anywhere ever should be doing these drugs because they have a personal moral opinion against it. We're not still going to be getting an opinion that is based on the legality and actual safety to the children. So for this reason, I still don't think this is going to get that kind of feedback that we're looking for. And I will vote against it now that it's separated out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Seeing no other speakers, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? We have 3 opposed. The motion carries. Thank you. We'll now turn to 13, staff reports. We have the 2019 annual report and a recommendation.
Move the recommendation that the Town of Sydney 2019 annual report be approved as presented.
Second.
Discussion? I see three hands simultaneously. I'll turn to Councillor Garnett, Councillor O'Keefe, and Councillor Fallett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I could go through you to staff. Looking at page 32, in the projected balances for the next 5 years, I wonder if you could speak to the year 2023 and year 2024, if there's something specific in there that shows the numbers to be so low that you're anticipating that we may need to know about?
Thank you, Councillor. It's primarily to do with our infrastructure replacement plans, which we've acknowledged need a little bit of work before we get to that point.
Thank you. And if I may, Mr. Mayor, just a comment. I noticed on page 17, looking at council meetings, I kind of had the feeling, but I was a bit surprised to see that we'd actually had more in-council closed camera sessions than committee of the whole. I understand, given the charter and what we have to discuss, there's a reason for it, but I do have a bit of an issue or a problem with it in the sense that of transparency and the fact that open council meetings and committee of the wholes are open to the public and in-camera meetings aren't. So I do have a bit of a problem with us having more in-camera meetings and committee of the whole in terms of discussing things in front of the public. Just my own particular feeling on things. So thank you. But thanks for the report. It's very in-depth.
Just a comment, if I might, on the last comment with regards to in-camera meetings. There are statutory requirements, very strict statutory requirements in terms of what council can consider in camera, and staff do present to us the reasons, stating the references to the community charter as to why we go in camera, and so I appreciate what you're saying in terms of a comparison between one type of meeting and another type of meeting, but when you look at the specific things that were discussed in camera, I believe they were appropriate at the time, and I believe that we have a process, as we did this evening. Personnel matters are an in-camera report. Tonight we rose from that in-camera meeting our discussions with regards to citizen appointments to various committees, and we rose and reported on that. So I think there is transparency there, but I acknowledge the points you made, Councillor. And did you have any further questions? Okay, I'll turn to Councillor Fallett and then Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to commend staff on the annual report for this year. It is very fresh. I love the photographs, and I'm really pleased that we've got some new photographs for it. And why is that important? Because I think it makes the pickup ability of the report that much easier. I think it's attractive. I love the way the information is put out, the graphics that are used. I think it's a good representation of our year and who we are as a municipality, what we have accomplished, what is on our list of to-dos, etc. So my compliments to staff on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a dozen or so questions. Just kidding. No, actually, no questions. Just comments. I also would like to commend staff on an excellent report. I think it's very thorough. It provides the public with a really good insight into all of the things that are being done on their behalf, mainly by staff, and things that are coming up in the future. So I think citizens reading this would be very impressed. I like the formatting. I like the layout. As Councillor Fallett said, it's attractive. It's easy to read. The use of pictorials and graphs, so people can grasp information very easily, easy to understand. So yeah, all I can say is it's a great job, staff. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe, for those positive remarks. Any further discussion? I would just like to make a comment and actually read just a portion of my mayor's message in the annual report. But as stated in the staff report, tonight's staff report, pursuant to the provincial community charter, municipalities must publish an annual report. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the province postponed the deadline for the report until August 31st. Thus, it is arriving later than usual this year. The annual report document, I think, is a very important communication from the town to the public. And I'd like to read part of my message to the public from the report and then ask Mr. Humble to read his message as well. Our report provides the community with a comprehensive review of council and town staff accomplishments in 2019, along with some of the initiatives planned for 2020. The report reviews the outcomes from priorities set in our 2019 to 2022 strategic plan, which council developed upon taking office in 2018, and which council reviews and updates annually. Our strategic plan mission statement shows the breadth of our responsibilities to the community. And quote, "The town of Sydney provides good governance, broad range of services, and stewardship of public assets, and fosters the social, economic, and environmental well-being of our community for current and future generations." Unquote. Good governance includes engagement and transparency. I want to thank staff for their informative reports to council, and I want to thank council for their commitment to meeting preparation, listening to community views, and deliberating fully on the wide-ranging business that comes before council, as well as the various council appointments that you have in Sydney and around the region. On behalf of council, I want to acknowledge the dedication and commitment of our town employees, volunteer firefighters, and RCMP police service to the services, quality services that they provide to residents, businesses, and community organizations. Please browse the report. I encourage everyone to do so and review the broad range of accomplishments. If there was one document or report you were going to read, I would highly recommend this one. It's so broad in its scope. And council and staff remain committed to our vision for Sydney to be a balanced, safe, healthy, and vibrant waterfront community with engaging cultural and recreational activities, prosperous and resilient businesses, and providing dependable sound services. Thank you. Mr. Humble, would you take a moment to read your message?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. And I'll rather than read the entire message, again, I'll pick certain aspects. The town's annual report is an opportunity to reflect on the excellent work that has been completed in the past year to support and carry out council's strategic plan, as well as the individual department work plans that follow council's strategic plan. Throughout the year, council and staff focused on delivering the key initiatives outlined in the 2019 to 2022 strategic plan that was developed in early 2019 by council. Completed projects included the community safety building, the largest capital project ever undertaken in the town's history. We also began the official community plan review, a major initiative that will have a significant long-term impression on the community. We also welcome new staff members to the town due to retirements and departures. I'm confident in saying that we have a strong management team ready to move forward with the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead. The town's exceptional fiscal management has and will continue to ensure we can deliver excellent services to the citizens of Sydney while keeping taxes stable. The sale of the old fire hall site, which has been the largest single land sale in Sydney's history, contributed to our sound financial situation. The town has continued to experience an unprecedented level of development and growth, a sign that Sydney remains a desirable place to live and to do business. Although no one could anticipate the impact of COVID-19 when it first became known in late 2019, it has changed and will likely continue to change our organization and community for the foreseeable future. As an organization, we are committed to adapting to the new normal and will commit to working towards recovery. In closing, I would like to extend my thanks to everyone who has played a role in another successful year for the town of Sydney. This includes the dedication of excellent staff, as well as the contributions of our passionate citizens, business leaders, volunteers, and community organizations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Humble. And with that, I'll call the question. All those in favor? And the motion carries to receive. We'll now continue with staff reports. The next three staff reports are remedial action on three separate residential properties in Sydney. I just want to mention to the public that these are very, very challenging matters before the town. There's a detailed staff report, and there is rather lengthy recommendations. These recommendations are approximately a page and a half in length. There is some similarity between them, but it is a requirement that we read these recommendations in full. So I just wanted to mention that before we proceed with the first, which is remedial action for 2110 James White Boulevard West, and a report from staff dated July 13th with recommendations.
I'll move the staff recommendation number 1, that pursuant to section 74 of the Community Charter, Council declare the property at 2110 James White Boulevard West a nuisance due to ongoing issues of unsightliness and debris on the property. 2, that pursuant to section 73 of the Community Charter, Council consider the following conditions present on the property at 2110 James White Boulevard West to be unsafe conditions, contraventions of the BC Building Code, and contrary to Town of Sydney Building Regulations Bylaw number 2016. Under that, on number 1, presence of black mold in the dwelling. 2, removal of interior walls, including structural and load-bearing walls, without a building permit. 3, open electrical wiring. 4, rot and damage due to excessive moisture. 5, lack of fire protection between dwelling units. 6, penetration of the building envelope. 7, removal of coverings, example drywall, on walls and ceilings. 8, removal of electrical outlets and lighting. 9, significant work and alterations conducted on the property without any building permit being issued to authorize that work. Number 3, that as a result of the nuisance declaration and unsafe conditions, contraventions of the BC Building Code and Town of Sydney Building Regulations Bylaw number 2016, that pursuant to section 72 of the Community Charter, Council authorize and impose a remedial action requirement on the registered owner of 2110 James White Boulevard West. 4, that staff be directed to prepare a registered letter to the registered owner of 2110 James White Boulevard West, pursuant to section 77 of the Community Charter, advising the registered owner of the nuisance, unsafe conditions, contraventions of the BC Building Code and Town of Sydney Building Regulations Bylaw, and Council's imposition of a remedial action requirement against each of them, and state that remedial action must be completed within 90 days of the date of the letter. 5, that pursuant to section 77 of the Community Charter, notice of the remedial action requirement also be served on any holder of a registered charge in relation to the property whose name is on the assessment roll and any occupier of the property. 6, that pursuant to sections 72, 73, 74, and 77 of the Community Charter, the registered owner of the property be required in the letter to take the following specific remedial actions on the property by the specified deadline. A, remedy the nuisance caused by the unkept state of the property by removing any discarded debris on the property and trimming the grass and shrubbery to a standard commensurate with the surrounding residential area. And B, remedy the hazardous conditions, contraventions of the Building Code and Building Regulation Bylaw number 2016, and nuisance conditions other than the unkept state of the property by either, under that, 1, in accordance with Building Regulation Bylaw number 2016 and other applicable Town of Sydney bylaws, obtain a demolition permit for the single-family dwelling on property and demolish the structure and clear the property of any construction debris, including the foundation of the building. Or 2, in accordance with Building Regulation Bylaw number 2016 and other applicable Town of Sydney bylaws, obtain a building permit and remediate the single-family dwelling on the property to address the aforementioned unsafe conditions and contraventions of the BC Building Code and Town of Sydney bylaws. 7, furthermore, if any remediation required by this resolution is not completed by the specified date, the staff be authorized to A, in accordance with section 17 of the Community Charter, take all necessary action to undertake and fulfill the requirements of this resolution to bring the property into compliance with the requirements of this resolution, which work will be conducted at the expense of the registered owner of the property, and further, to treat the cost of fulfilling the requirements of this resolution as a debt owed to the town, including without limitation to treat that debt, if unpaid by the end of this calendar year, to be added to the property taxes in relation to the property pursuant to section 258 of the Community Charter and collected in the same manner as property taxes in arrears. B, or sell the property and retain sufficient proceeds of the sale to pay for the cost of sale and to compensate the town for its costs in fulfilling the remedial action requirement before returning any surplus to the property owner. And C, in addition to and without limiting the town's ability to take the steps above, Staff is further authorized to engage legal counsel and commence legal proceedings to enforce compliance with the requirements of this resolution pursuant to Section 274 of the Community Charter.
Second.
Thank you, Councillor. Discussion? Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. I'm absolutely in favor of, we have to move forward with this. I guess my concerns go back to comments about adding this to the taxes, and concerns about, it sounds like if we did that, then we have to wait for those amounts to be in default for 3 years, it sounds like. So I guess what I'm worried about is our ability to actually do anything about that property and recover our costs for it. So I don't know that staff have an answer for that now, but I guess I would be I'd be interested to, getting further advice from legal counsel, as mentioned, and option C before we would proceed with that. And I just wonder if staff have any other further comment or suggestion on that.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Ms. Verhagen.
Thank you. Through the mayor to Councillor O'Keefe, my understanding is that the town would not have to wait until that 3-year time period lapsed and things went that far down the road of unpaid property taxes. We would be able to take action at the 90-day point if the property owner does not comply with the remedial action order. Then the town could undertake the work and add the cost to the property taxes, and then it would follow the process as per the finance regulations. Thank you.
Thank you. Follow-up,
Yeah,
Councillor O'Keefe?
Yeah, thank you. No, I understood that we could go ahead and take the action. I guess what I was saying is that our ability to recover those amounts then. So we could go in, whatever we decide to do, bulldoze it down and clear the property, whatever is most appropriate, but that we would still be limited to, we wouldn't be able to recover those costs for 3 years, is what I'm understanding. And so I'm looking for an alternate solution, like instead of adding it to the taxes, is there another charge that we could register on the title that would allow us to proceed sooner with an order to force the sale of the property?
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Mr. Hisik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To Councillor O'Keefe. If they were placed on taxes, they would be subject to interest from the time that they are taxes in arrears, and therefore they would bear interest until paid. But I'm also informed that under 7B, there is the option to sell the property earlier than that once we've received a court order that allows us to do so. And then we don't have to wait and impose all those
okay, so we wouldn't necessarily
charges.
So in this circumstance, we wouldn't have to go through the normal process that we would for a tax sale. There's another option for us.
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay, good, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Mr. Hisik. And Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I support definitely doing something here. I guess my greatest concern, not just this property which we're speaking to, but the other ones later, is that given the lack of accommodations for people in the community, that the owners might try to actually rent these spaces out. And given the report and given the pictures I've seen, that I wouldn't want to have somebody living in those kind of conditions. It's unhealthy and unsafe. So something definitely needs to be done quickly rather than later. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions or discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? The motion carries unanimous. Thank you. And thank you again, Councillor, for reading that. I'll turn to 13C, remedial action for 9971 Resthaven Drive, and a report also dated July 13th with a recommendation.
I'll move the staff recommendation, one, that pursuant to Section 74 of the Community Charter, Council declare the property at 9971 Resthaven Drive a nuisance due to ongoing issues of unsightliness and debris on the property. 2, that pursuant to Section 73 of the Community Charter, council consider the following conditions present on the property at 9971 Rest Haven Drive to be unsafe conditions, contraventions of the BC Building Code and contrary to Town of Sydney Building Regulation Bylaw number 2016. 1. Presence of black mold in the dwelling. 2. Removal of interior walls, including structural unload bearing walls without a building permit. 2. Open electrical wiring. That was 3. 4. Rot and damage due to excessive moisture. 5. Flammable materials attached to the wood burning appliance. 6. Penetration of the building envelope. 7. Removal of coverings, for example, drywall on walls and ceilings. 8. Removal of electrical outlets and lighting. 9. Lack of proper fire protection and venting for cooking equipment. 10. Significant work and alterations conducted on the property without any building permit being issued to authorize that work. 3. That as a result of the nuisance declaration and unsafe conditions, contraventions of the BC Building Code and Town of Sydney Building Regulations Bylaw number 2016, that pursuant to Section 72 of the Community Charter, Council authorize and impose a remedial action requirement on the registered owners of 9971 Rest Haven Drive. 4. That staff be directed to prepare a registered letter to the registered owners of 9971 Rest Haven Drive pursuant to Section 77 of the Community Charter, advising the registered owners of the nuisance, unsafe conditions, contravention of the BC Building Code and Town of Sydney Building Regulations Bylaws, and Council's imposition of a remedial action requirement against each of them, and state that remedial action must be completed within 90 days of the date of the letter. 5. That pursuant to Section 77 of the Community Charter, notice of the remedial action requirement also be served on any holder of a registered charge in relation to the property whose name is on the assessment roll and any occupier of the property. 6. That pursuant to Sections 72, 73, 74, and 77 of the Community Charter, the registered owners of the property be required in the letter to take the following specific remedial actions on the property by the specified deadline. A. Remedy the nuisance caused by the unkempt state of the property by removing any discarded debris on the property and trimming the grass and shrubbery to a standard commensurate with the surrounding residential area. And B. Remedy the hazardous conditions, contraventions of the BC Building Code and Building Regulation Bylaw number 2016, and nuisance conditions other than the unkempt state of the property by either 1. In accordance with the Building Regulation Bylaw number 2016 and other applicable Town of Sydney bylaws, obtain a demolition permit for the single-family dwelling on property and demolish the structure and clear the building of any construction debris, including the foundation of the building. Or 2. In accordance with the Building Regulation Bylaw number 2016 and other applicable Town of Sydney bylaws, obtain a building permit and remediate the single-family dwelling on the property to address the aforementioned unsafe conditions and contraventions of the BC Building Code and Town of Sydney bylaws. 7. Furthermore, if any remediation required by this resolution is not completed by the specified date, that staff be authorized to A. In accordance with Section 17 of the Community Charter, take all necessary action to undertake and fulfill the requirements of this resolution, to bring the property into compliance with the requirements of this resolution, which work will be conducted at the expense of the registered owners of the property, and further to treat the costs of fulfilling the requirements of this resolution as a debt owed to the town, including without limitation to treat that debt, if unpaid, by the end of this calendar year to be added to the property taxes in relation to the property pursuant to Section 258 of the Community Charter, and collected in the same manner as property taxes in arrears. B. Or sell the property and retain sufficient proceeds of the sale to pay for the costs of sale and to compensate the town for its cost in fulfilling the remedial action requirement before returning any surplus to the property owners. C. In addition to and without limiting the town's ability to take the steps above, staff is further authorized to engage legal counsel and commence legal proceedings to enforce compliance with the requirements of this resolution pursuant to Section 274 of the Community Charter.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? The motion carries unanimous. Thank you. We'll now turn to the third, item 13D, remedial action for 9973 Rest Haven Drive, and a report from staff dated July 13th as well. Seeing no one. Sir?
I'll move it.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. We appreciate it.
Number 1, that pursuant to Section 74 of the Community Charter, Council declare the property at 9973 Resthaven Drive a nuisance due to ongoing issues of unsightliness and debris on the property. 2, that pursuant to Section 73 of the Community Charter, Council consider the following conditions present on the property at 9973 Resthaven Drive to be unsafe conditions, contraventions of the BC Building Code, and contrary to Town of Sydney Building Regulations Bylaw number 2016. I, presence of black mold in the dwelling. 2, removal of interior walls, including the structural and load-bearing walls without a building permit. 3, open electrical wiring. 4, rot and damage due to excessive moisture. 5, penetration of the building envelope. 6, removal of coverings, e.g. drywall on walls and ceilings. 7, removal of electrical outlets and lighting. 8, significant work and alterations conducted on the property without any building permit being issued to authorize that work. Back up to major heading 3, that as a result of the nuisance declaration and unsafe conditions, contraventions of the BC Building Code and Town of Sydney Building Regulations Bylaw 2016, that pursuant to Section 72 of the Community Charter, Council authorize and impose a remedial action requirement on the registered owners of 9973 Resthaven Drive. 4, that staff be directed to prepare a registered letter to the registered owners of 9973 Resthaven Drive pursuant to Section 77 of the Community Charter, advising the registered owners of the nuisance, unsafe conditions, contraventions of the BC Building Code and Town of Sydney Building Regulations Bylaw, and Council's imposition of a remedial action requirement against each of them, and state that remedial action must be completed within 90 days of the date of the letter. 5, that pursuant to Section 77 of the Community Charter, notice of the remedial action requirement also be served on any holder of a registered charge in relation to the property whose name is on the assessment roll and any occupier of the property. 6, that pursuant to Sections 72, 73, 74, and 77 of the Community Charter, the registered owners of the property be required in the letter to take the following specific remedial actions on the property by the specified deadline. A, remedy the nuisance caused by the unkept state of the property by removing any discarded debris on the property and trimming the grass and shrubbery to a standard commensurate with the surrounding residential area. And B, remedy the hazardous conditions, contraventions of the Building Code and Building Regulation Bylaw 2016, and nuisance conditions other than the unkempt state of the property by either I, in accordance with Building Regulation Bylaw number 2016 and other applicable Town of Sydney bylaws, obtain a demolition permit for the single-family dwelling on property, demolish the structure and clear the property of any construction debris, including the foundation of the building. Or II, in accordance with the Building Regulation Bylaw number 2106 and other applicable Town of Sydney bylaws, obtain a building permit and remediate the single-family dwelling on the property to address the aforementioned unsafe conditions and contraventions of the BC Building Code and Town of Sydney bylaws. 7, furthermore, if any remediation required by this resolution is not completed by the specified date, the staff will be authorized to A, in accordance with Section 17 of the Community Charter, take all necessary action to undertake and fulfill the requirements of this resolution to bring the property into compliance with the requirements of this resolution, which work will be conducted at the expense of the registered owners of the property, and further to treat the cost of fulfilling the requirements of this resolution as a debt owed to the town, including without limitation to treat that debt, if unpaid by the end of this calendar year, to be added to the property taxes in relation to the property pursuant to Section 258 of the Community Charter, and collected in the same manner as property taxes in arrears. B, or sell the property and retain sufficient proceeds of the sale to pay for the costs of sale and to compensate the town for its costs in fulfilling the remedial action requirement or returning any surplus to the property owners. C, in addition to and without limiting the town's ability to take the steps above, staff is further authorized to engage the legal counsel and commence legal proceedings to enforce compliance with the requirements of this resolution pursuant to Section 274 of the Community Charter.
Second.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you, Councillor O'Toole. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? The motion carries unanimous. Thank you. We'll now turn to item 13E, which is the official community plan review collaboration among the 3 peninsula municipalities, and a report from staff dated August 11th.
I'll move the recommendation that a letter be sent to the District of North Saanich and the District of Central Saanich requesting intermunicipal cooperation during our respective OCP review processes in the areas identified in the staff report dated August 11th, 2020, as well as consideration for undertaking a tri-municipal approach for consultation with School District 63 and the Peninsula Recreation Commission.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? I just want to thank staff for this report and for the collaboration that is currently underway in terms of municipal staff from the 3 municipalities getting together and coming up with this report to move forward. I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Thank you. We'll next move to item 13F, which is concerns regarding the Tallista boat launch impacts and a report from staff dated August 11th.
I'll move the report be received for information.
Second.
Discussion. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. Just one of the suggestions made in public participation about getting the CRD involved. So I don't know how feasible that is, but that would be something that I would be interested in getting information on once, staff has an opportunity to look into this further. I'm also wondering, do we have any way of tracking whether the people who are launching there, whether they're residents or not? A question to through you, Mr. Mayor, to staff.
Thank you. Turn to Mr. Hissick.
In terms of the question about the CRD, my understanding is that it would have to be set up as service with the appropriate cost share mechanisms agreed upon by the parties that wish to join onto that service. So it's not a matter of them just doing it on behalf of the region without that kind of cost share arrangement being in place. And for the second part, I'll defer to Ms. Clary.
Through the mayor to Councillor O'Keefe. So we do have the license plate numbers of people who are launching their boats. So theoretically, we could compare that to residents where the license plate's registered, but we don't currently track who lives in Sydney and who does not.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Subsequent or follow up with Mr. Hissick.
Sorry, just to follow up on that. Through our discussions with the anglers, they're more aware of who the users are, and we are led to believe that the majority of users, if not the vast majority, are non-Sydney residents.
Thanks, Mr. Hissick. Councillor Fallot, then Councillor Rintoul.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I found the report very interesting, and I certainly have observed over the years the increase in boaters coming in here and the impact to our neighborhoods. And I think we do need to promote ourselves as perhaps a boutique boat launching facility. There is limited space to accommodate boaters. And it's really interesting. We're looking at a parking situation here for boaters with their trailers, and we've got limited parking for cars as it is as well. And I think there's going to have to be a mind shift. I realize that right now we're still dealing with a situation, how do we handle it, etc. But I think there has to be a mind shift in how we're using our space. And Sydney is not set up to be able to have a huge lot for boats, boat trailers and vehicles and shuttle service and all of those things. This is the time to start thinking about people bringing out their kayaks and anything that can be transported on their bicycle or on top of their cars or something like this. I think there's a real sense that the day of coming out to Sydney with a big vehicle and towing a boat is probably receding rather than increasing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fallot. I'll turn to Councillor Rintoul, then Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I think it's a great report. If nothing else, I think it raises profile to the issue, and obviously it's a seasonal issue, and we're in the peak of it. but some of the suggestions in here that perhaps we could move forward with, one of which is pricing. And the recognition here that currently someone who launches their boat and parks their truck and trailer at home pays the same as someone who uses the launch and then parks their vehicle and trailer at the launch for up to 24 hours. And so there's room, I think, to address this in part through pricing. One of the concerns that also comes to mind, when we talk about vehicles being parked in areas which are not permitted, with a large trailer in the back, and if I may refer this through to Chief Mickelson, perhaps, Mr. Mayor, have you seen scenarios, perhaps through the mayor to Chief Mickelson, where emergency vehicles, emergency traffic is impeded by these vehicles, and if so, what action can the town take in those scenarios?
Through the mayor to Councillor Rintoul, the answer is yes. We have in the peak season, as you are articulated, which we're definitely in, we have seen areas that have resulted in restrictions, primarily off of Weiler where you could either turn right onto North Lawn or left onto Maryland. Those are our two primary areas of concern where we have noted on numerous occasions restrictions where we would not be able to access down that road in a fire apparatus. It's very difficult even in a small family sedan. I believe that the town is somewhat encumbered. It's difficult because there isn't specific signage posted for no boat trailer parking or the like. But under those circumstances, the Fire Act, basically, or the provincial fire code, supersedes the municipal requirement, and we can have vehicles simply towed because you cannot restrict access for our roadway to firefighting or emergency apparatus. So in those extreme circumstances, we just have those vehicles removed.
If I may, just in follow-up, thank you, Chief Mickelson, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. So there's a suggestion there, perhaps improve signage, some of the pricing suggestions that are in here, and I'm pleased to hear that emergency services are addressing those situations as they're problematic, and it helps send a message to the broader community. This is a great facility, and if you're able to keep your truck and trailer back home once you've got your boat in the water, it's very helpful given these congested periods to plan to do so. So hopefully we can look forward to working through this and making some improvements as suggested in the report and keep the facility open for use as much as possible. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Mr. Humble first, and then to Councillor Garnett.
Just one comment as well on the signage and the pricing. I think it's worth pointing out too that even with those elements, which are potential avenues to be considered, there's some real challenges around trying to find a silver bullet here, because I don't think there is one. It is a very popular facility. The real challenge is that you get people coming from far afield. They spend a lot of money to get out here. And they've got big boats they're towing, so there's time and money invested. And by the time they get here and they realize, parking lots are all full up, the streets that they're allowed to park on are all full up, at that point they're in desperation mode. And so, you can increase the prices, you can have all the signage, but they'll be bound and determined to find a place to park. And because again, they've invested already a significant amount of time and money just to reach out here. So it's a real challenge around just the fact we're a small municipality that provides a service that is in high demand, and especially during peak periods. So that's one of the significant challenges that we face.
Thank you, Mr. Humble, and just to comment on that is another challenge just by circumstances that you put your boat in the water first and then you go look for parking, and that speaks to some of the comments Mr. Humble made. Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to staff, I wonder if there's been monitoring to tell whether or not there's much more uptake on use given the pandemic that's going on.
Through the mayor to Councillor Garnett, yes, we've found that there has been an uptick. Another local boat launch is actually closed due to the pandemic, so we have been seeing higher volumes of traffic.
Yeah, just if I may, thank you. Just speaking to Councillor Fowler's point, it's just that I had heard through somebody who's in the know that there's been a large increase in sales of boats as well. So I'm not sure if we're going to venture into people biking with their kayaks anytime soon. I think if this particular pandemic carries on in any great length of time, we're actually likely to see even more boaters, so it could become even more of an issue. So that's something to consider as we move forward with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And I mean, the first sentence of the background in the staff report, the public boat launch at Tallista Park is one of only 3 public facilities across the region. I mean, we're talking about 3 public facilities for the CRD, which has a population now of over 400,000. Yes, and the second sentence is, yes, there are a limited number of private facilities, of course, private marinas and otherwise, but it is a challenge. Any further discussion? Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I looked at this report and kind of saw that there's all of the options are difficult for us to implement, my thoughts around it were that the reservation system was perhaps the one that would be the easy or the most effective at meeting the needs of those people that Mr. Humble spoke of, who pay a lot of money to come here and, would like the opportunity to be assured that when they spend all that money and they get here and on that day, they'll have a spot assured. At the same time, boat access is one way that, some families in particular, that's a significant source of their food, fishing and hunting. And so I don't like putting too much emphasis on pricing structures, which will by definition make sure that the people with the big flashy boats who do nothing but recreation get access to that and push out the people who are actually needing boat access for genuine food security reasons. However, I think at this point, maybe to be able to start urging people to just plan ahead for when you're boating, that you get a friend or a family member or somebody to, drive your car, your trailer and your truck back to your house if you're somewhere here on the peninsula, and so you're accessing our dock for food reasons. And when you get back in, give them a ring and come go back and get them, and then you're not parking down there at the marina. So hopefully we can kind of meet the needs of those 2 overlap, or there's 2 mutually exclusive user groups. There may be more boats being sold now, but if this pandemic goes on for a long time, I don't know how many of those boats are going to, they're going to be resold real quick is my thought about that. So I don't know if it's going to keep getting worse. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor O'Keefe.
Mr. Mayor, a question through you to staff just about what is the fine that someone pays if they park their truck and boat trailer in a prohibited spot in the neighborhood? Is it just the same as a normal parking fine? And I don't recall how much that is.
Just turning to staff.
As a parking ticket, it is the same as a typical parking ticket, which I believe is $50 or $30 if paid within X number of days. There is a separate ticket for launching without a permit, and I'm sorry, I don't know the amount of that one.
Okay, so things I would be in favor is boosting significantly the fine for boat trailers that are parked where they shouldn't be. I like the idea of the reservations, having a fee for that, boosting the launch fee, and maybe put that into an account that could be used to fund an online reservation system similar to what BC Parks has. So just some of the ideas there I like. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Now turn to item 13H, which is our 2019 Statement of Financial Information, also known as the SOFI report. I did miss G.
What 13G?
Yes, thank you. I will go back one to 13G, and that is the Port Sydney Marina lease and sublease, and a report from staff dated August 11th.
I'll move the recommendation 1, that the 30-year lease with the province for the water lot portion of Port Sydney Marina be approved, and 2, that the 30-year sublease with Port Sydney Marina Incorporated be approved.
Second.
Discussion? Councillor Rintoul.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to just speak with regard to the second section of the motion around the sublease with Port Sydney Marina. I note in the staff report that we've referenced some of the community amenities during the term of the lease, and there are two specifically referenced. Within the lease document itself, the sublease that is, under section 5, when community amenities are referenced, the statement opens by reading, the subleasee will consider providing the following community amenities, and it lists docking space for a passenger ferry service, and it lists subject to prior approval of the province permission to extend the waterfront walkway above the relocated breakwater. It then continues in the final sentence to read that the subleasee is under no obligation to provide any such community amenities whatsoever. And so I'm very comfortable that we have a very reputable operator of the marina, and I recognize that. And I think it is an important service to the community to have a well-run marina that we as a community can be proud of and that can welcome transient boaters. But in that we'd previously approved sort of a 2-year version of this sublease, and now we're looking at a 30-year version. I guess I'd really like to encourage Port Sydney Marina in any way we can to conduct and carry out those amenities, those improvements that would not only benefit the marina, but the community as a whole. And so if I had any challenge with the sublease, Mr. Mayor, it would be that last sentence where it reads, the subleasee is under no obligation to provide any such community amenities whatsoever. I think that's addressed above in the first sentence reading, the subleasee will consider providing the following community amenities. I would be more comfortable removing that last sentence in section 5 and leaving the message to Port Sydney as a positive one, that we would certainly welcome these amenities in the community and encourage the marina over the course of the 30-year term to do so. So perhaps I'll pose that suggestion through to staff before I potentially move that as an amendment.
Mr. Humble or Mr. Hisik?
You want to speak to Dan, or
I
I
can.
Okay.
We did go back and forth a little bit with the sublessee on this one, and they insisted on that language just to make it clear that it's not, as it says, they're under no obligation to, but the earlier wording does say they will consider it. And it was important to them to make it very clear that it's not something they're obliged to do. And having had that discussion with them, I think it would be, I don't see them backing off on that one.
Thank you, Mr. Hisik. Mr. Humble?
Yeah, I also reflecting on when this first came forward to, I guess it was the previous council, and when it was presented by the Purdy Group, they at that time made it pretty clear in their presentation that again, these are opportunities that they're prepared to work with the town on as part of a lease renewal and or following a lease renewal. But they also made it clear that they were under no obligation to do it, but they're prepared to work towards that, and that seemed to be accepted. That was accepted at least by the previous council as well during those earlier discussions. So that's how the discussion evolved, and that's what sort of led to the language that's currently in the sublease.
Thank you, Mr. Hisik. A follow-up?
Yes, if council feels strongly about trying to remove that last sentence, we can certainly give it a go. I believe the preceding sentence already says the same thing unless less strong language, so we could indicate to them that council did want that to be removed and see what they say, and then we can report back. But perhaps if council could give an indication today whether they would approve this sublease without that removal and leave it at the discretion of the mayor and the CAO.
Turn to Councillor Rintoul.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I can appreciate there's obviously been significant discussion in advance of seeing this document this evening. I know we've, it's been presented fairly recently to council in the context of a 2-year agreement. A 30-year agreement is something very different, and I would be satisfied with the pledge from staff to have a discussion with respect to the sublease and removing that particular sentence, the final sentence under bullet 5. I think that opening language gives them some latitude, but I also think it puts the community amenities in a more positive context, that this is something that we would certainly hope. The scope of the work that they are looking, I think, to undertake in order to facilitate docking space for a passenger ferry is probably fairly significant. And so I understand, particularly in the current context, them struggling with a commitment of that nature, certainly. But in terms of their business plan and the development of the marina, those are initiatives that make sense not just for the community but for the marina itself. And so I'll leave it there, Mr. Mayor, and would be satisfied if staff pursue the removal of that sentence, and I will support the motion. Thank you.
Would, does staff feel comfortable moving forward that, or should there be some language within the motion? Or added to the motion, I'm sorry.
Well,
you mentioned with approving with discretion.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time coming up with the right wording on the fly here, but my understanding is that we should endeavor to have that last sentence approved, but if we're following our best efforts, we're not able to do that, then Councillor Rintoul would be comfortable with it approved, having tried that.
Okay, I'm comfortable leaving it with as is, and believe staff will make those efforts. Are there any other discussion? Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Now that it's a 30-year agreement, I'm wondering, since we're embarking on thinking about the future of Beacon Wharf and our waterfront and sea level rise, I'm wondering, are there things there that might impact this, what the marina wants to do, or impact any aspect of the agreement in any way? I don't know what that might be, but I'm just putting it out there to staff or other members of council if they can think of anything that we should anticipate in light of those things.
I'll turn to Mr. Hisik.
This is a private commercial enterprise, and they're motivated to do whatever it takes to keep it that way. It's difficult for us to predict right now what those impacts might be, but as I say, they've made a significant investment, and they're motivated to keep their business going. So I anticipate they'll do what is required to do that.
If I can,
Mr. Hum?
Yeah, further to that, it's really important that at the end of the day, so we have this is a sublease, and really, for the most part, what we want to do as a municipality is transfer the risk over to the sublease holder. And again, as Mr. Hisik pointed out, this is a private business. There's obligations for them to maintain the facility and keep it up to a certain standard as well, and that's articulated in the sublease agreement. So, yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward in terms of what the arrangement is.
Thank you, Mr. Humble. Further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? The motion carries unanimous. Thank you. I will now turn to item 13H, the 2019 Statement of Financial Information.
I'll move the recommendation that council approves the statement of financial information for the town of Sydney for the year ended December 31st, 2019.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. We'll turn to item 13I, the Ray Creek Dam renovation update. Report from staff dated August 12th, and I might turn to staff if they wish to provide an update.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this report is being brought forward because there was a report brought forward in July, on July 20th, 2020, requesting that we move forward with a time and materials unit rate contract with Cume Environmental. At that time, we had the cost estimate was based on our consultant estimate that we had, and we had a considerable buffer for cost overages. However, since then, we've been receiving price estimates from QM, and they are much closer to our budget number. And if we add any contingency at all, it's over our available budget at this time. So we're coming back to see how council would like to proceed. There are a few options outlined. The first option would be proceed with the dam project in 2020 with QM Environmental. We would recommend, because we did ask QM Environmental if they'd be willing to provide a unit rate contract or a lump sum contract, and at this time there's too many unknowns for the project, so they're not willing to do that at this time. There'd be a large risk dollar value added if they were to do that. So that would be on a time and materials unit rate contract, and we would recommend having a 30% contingency just in case there are unknowns. There are several unknowns with respect to excavating into the existing dam and removing existing material downstream of the dam. The second option would be we could split the earthworks portion and do that in 2020 with QM Environmental, and do the sheet pile portion of the work in 2021. So the price estimates that QM provided, the sheet pile work was the largest variance from the KWL estimate. So that would allow us to get competitive tenders for the sheet pile work next year, even though QM Environmental actually did get 3 different quotes from different sheet pile contractors, and they did provide us with those, so they're being very transparent about that. So if they're to do that, there are some benefits to getting portions of the dam work done this year while Transport Canada has the pond dewatered. Again, it's unclear if the sheet pile work will be cheaper next year or it'll be the same cost. It's hard to know at this time based on material and labor and equipment availability. And then the third option would be to complete the work by a competitive tender process in 2021. So with that option, there would be the town would be responsible for dewatering the pond, so there would be no benefits doing the 2 projects at the same time. That would also be the highest impact to the surrounding residents and the environment, because you're dewatering the pond twice. QM Environmental has already done the fish salvage for the pond remediation project, so we'd have to do that again next year if we were to do the dam next year, and also just the impact to the residents, having 2 significant construction projects happening 2 summers in a row. So those are the options, and I'll stay here in case there are any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Clary. Councilor Rintoul.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Clary, it might say this in here, so apologies if it does. I may have missed it. The quotes that QM have received for the sheet piling work, are those fixed price?
That will be like a lump sum price in the contract, yeah.
Okay, so it's not the sheet metal quotes that they shared with you were not sort of a time and materials. So the risk associated with the sheet pile price, which you're saying came in, higher than they had anticipated, or that we had anticipated as well. The risk element associated with sheet pile is mitigated in that it's fixed price work.
Yes, we would still recommend having a bit of contingency in case there was any, unforeseen circumstances, but yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Further discussion? Councillor Wainwright.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So it's certainly it's not welcome news that the cost estimate from Q&M is higher than the KWL estimate was, and but you know, we're where we are. There's significantly more environmental impact and impact on the neighborhood if we go with either option 2 or option 3. And either option 2 or option 3 also has some significant risks for us and some additional costs that that aren't there if we go with option 1. But option 1 does need a contingency. So I'm you know, taking all that into account, I'm inclined to go with option 1 and increase the budget to give them the additional contingency they need and hope that they don't need to use it.
Thank you, Councillor. Turn to Councillor Rintoul.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would concur with that. In fact, I feel a sense of security in that we've allocated a contingency based on up-to-date numbers, and it means reallocating budget resources, obviously. But I'm pleased to hear that significant element of work and the sheet piling to be done is fixed. It helps eliminate an element of surprise potentially for us. So I'm comfortable with this. I do have a question, however, if I may, Mr. Mayor, with regard to the recommended motion from staff, and it reads that council confirm the direction to enter into a time and materials unit rate contract with QM Environmental for the renovation of Ray Creek Dam in 2020, comma. The section I just read, I believe council's already passed that motion, if I'm not mistaken. So the reality is, all we're really doing in this case is the second half of the motion, allocating additional budget. Could I clarify that with staff?
Mr. Hisek, thank you.
What we're asking council to do is to confirm that previous decision based on the new information. So when we last came to you, we had a bigger cushion, and now it's a smaller cushion. So we just want you to confirm for us that you're still okay with it.
Very good. Councillor Garnett?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I think Councillor Rintoul brought up a good question, and I think the answer is one that I can live with for sure. And also, I concur with Councillor Wainwright. You know, not upsetting the neighbors and putting them in great upheaval 2 summers in a row. The potential environmental impacts by having to dewater 2 years in a row. I think it's, and the fact that the money's coming from the land sale reserve makes me feel a lot more comfortable as well with approving the recommendation once we present it.
Thank you. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question through you to staff, perhaps on our process for how contracts the prices are estimated. And so I note that the consultant KWL, they did the estimate in 2017. So that was 3 years ago. So would we normally go back to KWL and say, hey, this is what you estimated the contract on. Here's what this company is offering us. Would we provide KWL the opportunity to look at that on our behalf to say, yes, we believe that's reasonable based on today's prices and current market conditions? Do we get that kind of additional advice from them on these things?
Ms. Clary?
Through the mayor to Councillor O'Keefe. Sorry, I can see why that wording is misleading. So they actually did the estimate recently, within the past couple months, with a project that was completed in 2017. But yes, we have been working very closely with KWL throughout this process. They've reviewed QM's the quotes that they received from the sheet pile contractors and their additional pricing that they've received. So we have been working very closely with KWL, and they were a little surprised about the sheet pile pricing, as all of us were, even QM was surprised about it, but I think it just it's related to do with supply and demand at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Rintoul.
I'm all prepared to move the recommendation, Mr. Mayor, if you're ready.
Certainly.
I'll move the staff recommendation that council confirm the direction to enter into a time and materials unit rate contract with QM Environmental for the renovation of Ray Creek Dam in 2020 and allocate an additional $150,000 in budget for the project funded from the land sale reserve.
Second.
Further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? The motion carries unanimous. Thank you. We certainly look forward to that work commencing. I'll now turn to item 13J, the COVID-19 EOC activation conclusions and insights, a report from the chief dated August 11th.
Move the recommendation that this report dated August 11th, 2020 be received for information and that council authorize staff to conduct a Town of Sydney COVID-19 response survey.
Second.
Discussion? Councillor O'Keefe, then Councillor Fallett.
Just start with, I guess, question first. So I recall that we had discussion about getting an after-action report that would describe the challenges we had during this pandemic, how we responded, what worked well, what did we struggle with, lessons learned, and what to change for next time. So I'm wondering, is that what this is, or is this something just preliminary and we're going to get something with that detail later on?
Through the mayor to Councillor O'Keefe, this is I think best described as a preliminary kind of after action or lessons learned. We did state to council that we would provide a more fulsome lessons learned that would be inclusive of some of the work performed by the Recovery Task Force. But at this time, we just wanted to provide something very specific to the work done by the EOC and keep it within that finite scope of work, so they didn't have the crossover, which is actually was a good thing that we embedded the recovery piece into the work done by the EOC as well. But we wanted to provide this in a timely fashion and keep the work package relatively compact for this time. So that's why it's presented just as the EOC's work.
A follow-up, Councillor O'Keefe?
Yeah, thank you. So I guess what I would like to know more about, and maybe that's coming, but in terms of, I'd like a better sense of how well we are prepared for that second wave. So things like, and also when, in the event that there is a second wave, when would we activate the EOC? And I guess what I'm thinking about is that when we activated the EOC the first time, we're fortunate that there wasn't an outbreak in Sydney, but the EOC did a great job of educating businesses and residents, putting signage up for social distancing, liaising with care homes, dealing with homeless persons, doing a lot of preparation and that sort of thing. So I'm wondering, now that all that preparation, that education, that signage is in place, I'm assuming that the groundwork is laid for, if there was an outbreak. So am I correct in assuming that the EOC would only be activated again if there was a significant outbreak in Sydney, or what are the parameters that we would use to identify when to activate it again?
So again, through the mayor to Councillor O'Keefe, I would say first and foremost, the second part of this report requests a response survey, and that will help inform us or have some linkage in respect to when we might consider an EOC reactivation based on circumstance. And again, there's various iterations and levels of an EOC. EOC level 1 is quite small, with only 1 or 2 people, largely in kind of a monitoring situation. And then, as we're well aware, we were at an EOC level 2 activation for many months, and that was anywhere from 10 to 16 people working long days. So it depends on a number of circumstances. You're correct that we're much more prepared than we were in mid-March. And it would be a number of factors could trigger whether it was a limited or a more comprehensive EOC activation, including whether it be an outbreak here in Sydney or on the Stanage Peninsula, or circumstances dictate anywhere in the CRD or perhaps on the island in respect to general health or the population, we would do that. And again, I would add that the first time we opened our EOC, we did it proactively and aggressively to get ahead of it. And I think given if we had to do that again, we would take that posture again, because it served us well in March. So typically an EOC is stood up at the direction of the emergency director in consultation with the CAO and the mayor, and that would likely happen again. Even if we considered even standing up the EOC to a level 1, it would be done on a consultative basis prior to.
Okay, I've got some other questions, but I'll leave those for now and let other councillors speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. I'll turn to Mr. Humble.
Yeah, just following up on sort of preparing for the second wave as well. It is an element, a key element of the recovery task force as well, in terms of looking at how to look at lessons learned from our initial response and how to best prepare for a second wave. So again, it's something that the recovery task force will also be turning its mind to, and once that happens, it will be reporting that out to council.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Humble. Did you wish to continue, Councillor O'Keefe?
Well, I just a comment on the survey. I guess my initial reaction is that I understand Chief Mickelson's comments about trying to do something specific for EOC, but I guess I'm concerned that we've had 2 surveys already: a business survey, a resident survey. We're going to be going out to the citizens again with OCP and other things. So a little bit of concern about survey fatigue. And when I look at the questions, they seem to revolve around the same sort of thing. So it seems to be in terms of communication. They seem to be duplication of things. So, for example, question number 2 asks, communication from the town was appropriate for the incident. And another question says, do you feel that the town kept you informed throughout the pandemic? And then another question says, did you feel that the information was relayed effectively? And then another question says, where can the town improve on communications? So I guess I'm having difficulty with the survey because it feels like it's a duplication. And I'm not sure that we're going to get the sort of information that we're looking for with this particular survey. So I'll just leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor Fallot, then Councillor Garnett.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too, Councillor O'Keefe just sort of basically said what was going through my head looking at the survey. I think we're running the risk of survey fatigue, but B, I'm looking at the survey and I almost think that this survey, the type of questions, even though there is repetition, I see that as well. It seems more geared towards the staff. This would be something that to ask our town staff, the RCMP, etc. I don't see this asking the sort of questions that the community is really going to be giving appropriate feedback. I struggle to imagine that we're going to get the type of information that we apparently are looking for. I don't think this is an effective survey. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With regards to survey fatigue, I can understand what my fellow councillors are saying, but this is a rather short survey, so I'm not sure if that would be a factor here. And with regard to repetition or rewording of similar questions, it's not uncommon in a survey to do that from a reliability index point of view. It provides you with a good backdrop as to whether the people are answering similarly. So it's something that's usually normally built into surveys anyways. generally larger surveys than this, but that's not uncommon. So I just thought I'd comment on that.
Thank you, Councillor Garnett. I may just comment that I initially saw the survey before I saw Mr. Mickelson's report, and the report, puts the survey in context for me, and I think it's an excellent report. And it references the British Columbia Emergency Management System, and it references the process. It references the successes that Sydney has had under this management system and planning for probably more than a decade, and how we were able to execute. We know that given that we stood up in EOC with at least a dozen staff members, many of them very experienced staff members, that there will be invaluable experience gained from the operation of that EOC over 15 weeks. And it seems that this is part of the process, to gain this particular feedback from residents vis-a-vis the operation of the EOC. I concur with my colleagues in terms of, yes, we could try and get other information, and that might be of interest or helpful to us, but in terms of the process, the thinking that that our emergency management coordinator, the chief, is following here, this is the type of information that will be that they are looking for at this time. And I might have, it might have been helpful to have it a little sooner, but this is a pandemic, and we're proceeding as best we can. So I support the survey. I think to Councillor Garnett's point, this is going to be, I could do the survey in 2 minutes. It can be done fairly quickly, and it will be interesting as to whether, there's not a significant cost to it, and I think, the results will provide information one way or another for our emergency management team. Further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? We have one opposed. The motion carries. Thank you. I'll now turn to item 13K, which is an amendment to policy CC 010, webcasting of council meetings.
I'll move the recommendation that policy CC-010, webcasting council meetings, be approved as amended.
Second.
Discussion? Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question through you to staff. I'm struggling with number 4 and 5 in the policy because they seem to contradict each other. So maybe it's just my understanding of the wording needs clarification. So number 4 says, posting a meeting webcast on the website is not a requirement and is provided for convenience purposes only. And then it says in number 5, webcasts will normally be made available on the town's website within 2 business days of the meeting. So the way that I'm reading it is, on one hand, we're saying that, posting these is not a requirement, but then in the second case, we're saying that they will be made available within 2 business days of the meeting. So, some clarification on those, whether we need both of those clauses in there. Either we're doing it or we're not doing it, I guess.
I'll turn to Ms. Nelson.
Through the mayor to Councillor O'Keefe, number 4, with regards to webcasting not being a requirement, that's basically just to indicate that it's not a legislative requirement under the community charter. This is something that council has decided on doing. We've never webcasted before live.
Okay.
And with respect to normally being made available within 2 business days, that's basically just giving an idea to the public that, the webcast, the recording will be posted on the website within 2 days. And we put the word normally there in case there's technical issues or staff is away, or, let's say that, we had a council meeting that was not in the council chambers, but was somewhere else, and we'd have to set up a recording. That takes more than 2 days to actually get the recording to us. So just giving the public an indication that we try and get it up within 2 business days.
Yeah, no, that's good. Specifying that it's not a legislative requirement. That was that clarifies it for me. So thank you for that.
Council, I reviewed this close to today's meeting, and I had some of the same questions that Councillor O'Keefe had. But there was also a couple of other points that I had some discussion with staff today. For example, in number 1, it refers to a regular council meeting. It should probably also say special council meeting. And there's some other language with regards to audio recorded being taken out of 1, but it's still in number 3. I have a bit of a concern, but I had discussion and have some appreciation of staff of number 8 in terms of meetings of other town committees may be video recorded. There's a reason for that language, but my preference, quite frankly, is I didn't want to bring substantial amendments that would be difficult to verbalize this evening. So I would ask Council's indulgence if they might consider tabling this to the next meeting, and if I could have further discussion. I'll turn to Mr. Humble.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And as the mayor pointed out, we did have discussions regarding this, and quite frankly, staff, from a staff perspective, we have no concerns with respect to maybe tabling or deferring this until a later date. In fact, a lot of the reasons for bringing this update forward, essentially were to try to put it in line with respect to what the way we're currently operating under COVID-19, given the fact that it's a bit of a moving target and the fluency of COVID-19. I'm wondering whether or not, rather than suggest that we bring it forward at the next subsequent council meeting, that we could, staff could take a little bit longer and bring it back at a time that works for us once we've had a more fulsome review, and so that we're not having to again, with changes due to COVID, that we're having to bring it back yet again at another point. So appreciate those comments from council on this, but we're certainly open to bringing it back at a later date.
Okay. I'm comfortable with doing that, partially because I think we're functioning well in terms of our live webcasting and in terms of our posting webcast meetings and public participation. I saw Councillor Wainwright's hand and then Councillor Rintoul.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Rather than tabling it, I think the appropriate thing would be for us to just refer the policy back to staff.
Thank you, Councillor. Do you so move?
I believe we have a motion on the floor already
I'm
that
sorry.
has to be withdrawn.
Mr. Mayor, I was going to suggest I withdraw the motion.
And the seconder withdraws. Thank you.
And in that case, I'll move that the policy be referred to staff and brought back at a future meeting.
Second.
Thank you, Councillor Wainwright. And any further discussion? Seeing Councillor O'Keefe.
Yep, so if they're going to review, I was just going to say, for number 3, when it says appropriate notification, I would knock off the appropriate. I don't think that's required. I would also be looking for some clarity on number 8 about who deems whether recording of the meetings is necessary. And also if they can, in number 8, it talks about video recorded, but is there something we need to do extra for audio recordings? I don't know. So I'll just throw those out there for staff's consideration as they review the policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call a question. All in favor? None opposed. The motion carries. Thank you. We'll move to item 13L, which is the amendment to policy AD-003 regarding our legal counsel, and a report from staff dated June 29th. And we did have some revisions sent to us earlier today, which I'll turn to.
Okay. I'll move the recommendation that policy AD-003 legal counsel be approved as amended.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Now turn to item 13M, our monthly building permit report, July 2020.
Move receipt for information.
Second?
Discussion? Questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. We'll now turn to correspondence, and our first item of correspondence under 14A is support for a provincial rest stop. The email from the Sandwich Peninsula Chamber of Commerce dated July 20th.
I'll move that staff provide a letter of support.
Second?
Discussion? Seeing none, I just want to thank Executive Director Denny Warner for her moving this forward, and I'll call the question. All in favor? Carries unanimous. Thank you. And we'll move to the item 14B, which is a request for ban of anticoagulant rodenticides, an email from the District of Sandwich dated July 3rd with a recommendation from staff.
I'll move that we refer to staff for report.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. The motion carries. Thank you. We have no new business. We do have correspondence for information under 16.
I'll move receipt for information.
Second?
All those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. We have no notices of motion, but we do have 18, a motion to go in camera.
I'll move that it is in the opinion of council that the public interest requires that persons other than members of council and officers be excluded from the meeting to consider a confidential matter relating to a personnel issue pursuant to section 90.1C of the community charter, and that council continue the meeting in closed session.
Second.
All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you.
Move adjournment.
All those in favor? Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, staff.